Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. Our guest today on Got Grass is bassist Todd Phillips. Todd was a key part of three of the greatest bands of all time, the David Grisman Quintet, the Tony Rice Unit, and the Bluegrass Album Band. I'm sure he has more stories than we'll possibly get to today, but we'll give it a try. Welcome, Todd, to Got Grass.
Hey, thank you.
I think we first met here at Guitar Town in 2018 at our 10th anniversary concert, which we called Manzanita. Our idea had been to present some of the music from Tony Rice's album of the same name and some songs from the Bluegrass Album Band. Yeah. So it was you on bass with Justin Moses on dobro, Ricky Simpkins on the fiddle, Josh Williams on guitar, and Doyle Lawson on the mandolin. I remember that evening.
I sure do. Not a bad band at all.
I think you guys probably hadn't played that material for what, 30 years or so?
Yeah, probably at least that. I don't even want to, sometimes it's 50. The answer is 50 years now and then these days. You go back to the Grisman Quintet, it's getting back there now.
That's a scary number, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember how Doyle Lawson didn't know the Manzanita album?
I do.
We all found out. It was kind of funny at the time.
I was happy to present him with his first copy of the CD.
Oh, nice.
He said, I've never had this record. I don't know this record. I said, well, here you go. Let me be the one. Yeah.
I guess he grew up in different musical circles than you guys did.
Yeah, and I totally understand it. I hardly ever listen to anything I'm not actually involved in anymore. Just so many hours in a day, you know?
Right. So let's get back to the earliest days. Where did you grow up?
I'm from San Jose, California. That's the South Bay area.
Mm-hmm. And so what was your musical childhood like? Do you have recollections of hearing music early on?
Yeah. You know, I just realized now people know that of Silicon Valley, it's like where eBay and PayPal and all these things are. But when I grew up there, it was a bunch of cherry orchards. And my brother and I started a band when we were about, well, I think I was 11 years old. So he might have been like 8. And I think I forced him to be the drummer, and we just started playing whatever we heard on the radio, which was, you know, like first the Beach Boys, then the Beatles, and then through high school, you know, kind of went through the 1960s rock and roll stuff. And by the time I got to the end of high school, it started leaning a little more towards the folky stuff, you know, like Crosby, Stills and Nash, the Byrds. And then I became aware of like Ry Cooder when I was still, you know, near the end of high school, for folk music, you know, like Ry Cooder and, you know, the band came out about that time. Sure. I graduated high school in 1971.
Yeah, we're exactly the same age, I think. Born in 53. Yeah. So as a kid, did you listen to bluegrass, or are you listening to more pop rock kind of folk stuff of the
I just kind of evolved through all the music that was happening at that time, you know. Didn't play any of the Carpenters music, but you know, anywhere from the folky rock and roll stuff like the Byrds. When I did start playing with some guys that were older than me, we started doing like the Byrds and I don't know, Crosby, Stills and Nash. I started becoming aware of like 3-part harmony stuff and how it worked. And then the summer I got out of high school, there was a little radio station called KTAO Radio, and there were 2 DJs there. One was Cousin Al Noth, and another guy named Billy Iberti. And they were just playing bluegrass music. And it was the summer I got out of high school, and I switched from electric bass to upright bass, and suddenly was playing 3 or 4 nights a week in a pizza parlor, just playing that new music that I had happened across.
Yeah.
Being from California, it's not the same as growing up in North Carolina or something. Uh, it sort of found me, and that summer I got out of high school, I kind of switched gears.
So how did you get involved playing the bass? Was that always your instrument, or did you play guitar early on?
Yeah.
Or
No, I got an electric guitar when I was 11, but I was playing the bass lines. And then by the time I was about 12 or 13, I had a Fender Precision bass. And I honestly think it was my training for playing the upright bass because I was probably about 4 feet tall then. And I can remember having to move it so I could reach the tuners and then move it back so I could play it. So scale wise, I think I was stretching equally to what I do today on an upright bass.
right.
So my hands kind of grew up. People ask me if have had training to play upright bass, and I haven't at all. But I think growing up on a precision bass when you're that small sort of makes your hands grow into the right positions, naturally, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I was talking with Missy Raines recently on a earlier interview we did, and she said that the bass that her parents bought her, the acoustic bass, her
Yeah.
parents bought her as a teenager, is the only bass she's ever played. Like
Yeah.
she still has that bass which she got when she was 13, and
Yeah.
she's never played another one.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite bass you've had since you were younger, acoustic bass, or you got a bunch of them? Or
Well, no, I've only had one bass before. I've got this cold. I'm going to be a little rough here, but
it's okay. It's okay.
um, I bought a K, probably it was the early 50s, I believe, K bass that summer I got out of high school. And I tried that on Tony Rice's first album he made in California, which was that kind of green border with the herringbone. It's just called Tony Rice. So he's standing in front of a little fig tree.
Right.
Uh,
Yep.
um, that's the only name on it, but it was almost called Rattlesnake, but that instrumental Rattlesnake is on it. Anyway, I tried it on that record, and we were listening to so much jazz at the time. The K bass thumpy sound. There's some really great K basses, and then some not so great. And maybe I didn't have the greatest one, but I he found me a bass in a little 2-line want ad in the little Berkeley paper. I forget what it's called. And so suddenly we borrowed a bass to do that first record. It was Bill Omatnik's bass, and
Mhm.
then I think I played a little bit of the K on it. There's probably about half and half. But before the Manzanita record happened, he found a bass on that little want ad, and we went and bought it together. And that's been my main instrument ever since. So
So
that was
that's
probably about 1977, 78.
so that's a good long relationship with one instrument.
Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah.
like Missy's, like, it's hard enough to find the notes on a bass that you know really well. So it's good to stick with one, because every time I pick it up, I kind of have to say, okay, where are these notes again? You have to
Yeah.
familiarize yourself with the fingerboard really like every time. You
Yeah.
know, it's a lot of blank ebony to find notes on.
Did you have any acoustic bass heroes early on, like someone like Ray Brown or anyone like that? Or
Yeah. Well, um, I guess it's hard to name a favorite, but
Mhm.
Scott LaFaro, that played bass in the Bill Evans trio, is
Oh, right.
probably a
Yep.
great inspiration. Um, and not so much for bluegrass, but he sort of set me free to play around the beat as opposed to, 2 notes per measure kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard Del McCurry say that yeah, oh, he'll skip a note. He can skip a note, things like that. And I know
Yeah.
he's just talking about a syncopated thing or two. And and that's in that Bill Evans trio, the drummer played so straight and simple that the bass player was kind of allowed to play a little more free.
Hmm.
Not necessarily boom, boom, boom. And playing with Tony Rice was kind of the same thing. He encouraged it. We listened to a lot of jazz together, And so he liked that. I ended up with a German solid wood bass, um, kind of impersonating the stuff that we were listening to in our free time back then.
Yeah. So did you know Tony Rice before you met David Grisman?
No, I met
No.
David, probably knew David, I don't know, within the first year of knowing David. I think Tony came out for a visit, maybe on his own. And then I saw him again a few months later when the whole JD Crow band was on their way to Japan. They all stopped
Right.
in San Francisco.
Yeah. Heard that story. Yeah.
Yeah, so we spent a few days together then. And and then after they did that tour, Tony loaded up a little U-Haul and moved to California. And I guess that was all 1974 or five. I'm not sure right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was David Grisman looking for specific musicians to fill out his band, or was it just kind of good luck that you all kind of found each other? How
Yeah,
did
I
that
think
work?
I think that band just kind of uh, happened to itself. I mean, I met David. I took some mandolin classes that he was giving, and we kind of hooked up. And I think it was the first time I went to one of his classes there. There's probably only like eight students, 8 or 10 or 12, something like that.
Hmm.
He said, "Oh, hey, man, come on up to my house, check out my mandolins and stuff." We just sort of hit it off immediately, and I was building mandolin bridges, and I guess that's what sparked his attention. I guess I could hold a pick and build mandolin bridges, so he
That's
invited me
pretty
up
good
to his house.
skills. Huh. Pretty good
Yeah,
skills. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
Actually, when you get a group of students together like that, being able to hold a pick's not always, universal. But
Yeah.
um, anyway, there's a wide range. Beginners, I can't remember, but he stopped teaching the class, and we immediately, I think within a week or two or three, he asked me, "What do you want to learn?" And initially he didn't know I was a bass player. Had been a bass player since I was a kid. I was about, let me think, 22 at the time, maybe that I met him.
Yeah.
And let's see, he said, "Well, what do you want to learn?" And I said, "Well, I like the stuff that you're writing." And so we just started hanging out and doing mandolin duets, mostly based on his original stuff. And then I invited Daryl Anger into that mix, and David had been playing with a bass player named Joe Carroll. And so we played as a quartet like that for probably a year before David met Tony. He hadn't even met him. He didn't even know about him. And he
Right.
met him at a Bill Keith recording session. And uh, we were kind of content playing as a quartet, and Clarence White had just died. And like David said, man, there's really no guitar player for this band, you know, other than Clarence.
Hmm.
So, when he met Tony, he invited him out for the visit, and uh, that's how that band got going.
Yeah. So you just happened to be taking mandolin lessons with David Grisman, and then you liked his music. He liked you. You hit it off, and then did he invite you to join the band as a mandolin player? Is that how it
Well,
started?
the
Or
band just sort of formed itself around him. Like, well, he used to say it, I can't remember the exact way. It's uh, like we just didn't give him a choice, basically. I,
yeah,
I
right.
I kept showing up, and then I said, "Hey, I know this fiddle player that maybe can do this," and brought Daryl into it. And yeah, he just really, I mean, he would have had to chase us away.
Right.
Basically, it was his music that, uh,
Yeah,
was like the beacon for it, and
yeah,
we formed around him. And that's how it worked with Tony too. Like he was in JD Crow's band and heard the music and said, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm there too."
yeah. I've heard the story about that. How we heard Grisman's music, and just that was it for him. He said, "This is what I've always wanted to play," and
Yeah,
he just quit bluegrass and moved out west, and like
Yeah.
changed his whole life right away.
It
That's
was a
interesting.
huge leap for him. Well, for all of us, I mean,
Yeah.
my knowledge, well, really all of our knowledges of theory was pretty limited. We really sculpted it out of ignorance in a lot of ways. David's girlfriend at the time was taking piano lessons, and she would help us figure out what some of the names of the chords were. But it was really by sound first,
So
and
that's how you learn the songs, just by kind of hearing them and playing them and saying, no, that's not the chord. This is the chord. And how about this?
yeah,
It wasn't technically like sheet music approach or anything like that. It
no,
was purely ear and what you could play and what sounded good.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we'd figure out the chords on the fingerboard, and then we'd kind of figure out what to call them, and fairly accurately eventually. And then, not that we needed to name them really, but then that's one of the beauties of that band is we worked pretty hard for maybe a year before Tony arrived, and then we started over again because
Mm,
he didn't know those kind of chord voicings that we needed.
right.
And so, and he worked that out by ear and on with his fingers, not by, going to the Berklee School of Music, you know, or having reference books or any of that. He just knew the sound he needed to get and worked until he found those chord voicings,
Oh.
and then figured out what to name them later.
So you were learning mandolin. You had been playing bass for a long time.
Yeah.
You were playing mandolin with Grisman's group, and then at some point, did you become the bass player and a new mandolin player came in, or how did that work, or was it just
Yeah. Yeah, there was always a little tension with the bass. Like Tony really needed that bluegrass foundation. We
right,
were playing a little swimmier kind of jazz with Joe Carroll.
right?
And then Bill Amotnik, who recorded the first David Grisman Quintet album with us, and I was still playing mandolin. He was more of a big band kind of a bass player. You know, uh, there's there's a few different kinds of groups. The string ensemble. Like a Django Reinhardt band or a bluegrass band. The band becomes their own drummer, and then there's other musicians that kind of need the drummer. If you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
Um,
Yeah,
uh, and our first bass player, Joe Carroll, was a great, great bass player, but he was used to a jazz setting where the drummer set the tempo, not the mandolin player or the guitar player. And,
right.
or in bluegrass, it's, I would say the banjo probably has the most power to do that, um, either make it great or destroy it. And,
Mhm.
but I played bluegrass in the pizza parlors for 4 or 5 years, like, 3 nights a week, 4 hours a night, that kind of a thing. So I'd kind of done my cavern club thing, uh, but on bass. So,
Analogy, yeah.
I was a newbie on the mandolin, but I had sort of a good right hand for strumming. I didn't go through my Bill Monroe school, so I didn't really know all the fiddle tunes or proficient at that.
Right.
But so I kind of invented a new role just to fit in, which was second mandolin playing rhythm for David, which and in a way I think I did it from a bass player's perspective, like a supportive kind of a role,
Hmm.
which mandolin players don't naturally do.
Right. Right.
So it was
Yeah.
kind of a strange role, made the band a little more unique, I think.
Yeah. So were you guys, did you, any of you live together at that time? Were you just all
Oh
around the
yeah.
same? You did? Yeah, yeah.
We pretty almost spent 24 hours a day together, all of us. But
Right.
Tony had a little apartment, but he would show up at my house at 10. If we had a day where we weren't rehearsing, he'd be knocking on the door at 10 in the morning. He was like a fish out of water in California. And so, um, we were just like buddies every day, no matter what. And then
Hmm.
eventually Daryl and I had a house together. Um, I did live at Tony's house for a little while later too. Yeah. After the Grisman Quintet. Um, we bounced around between different houses. It was,
Yeah.
you know, just kind of the way, bands were in those days when you're 20 something years old.
Yeah, I guess for people living today, young people, that's probably hard to imagine the kind of the loose musical, cultural, hip vibe that was out in California at that time, right? I mean, I mean, I wasn't there, but I just can imagine it was pretty exciting, pretty fun, playing
Yeah.
music all the time, listening to music, going to
Yeah.
clubs, staying up all night, right?
Oh yeah. We were up late every night, had dinner at 2 in the morning. And yeah, there was a club in San Francisco called the Great American Music Hall. And we ended up playing there pretty regularly ourselves. But, in the mid 70s, I mean, I saw everybody there. That's where we met Stephen Grappelli and got to know him. Um, I mean, I saw Bill Evans Trio there a few times, Charles Mingus.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, I mean, I could just go on and on. Almost every jazz great was still alive.
Right.
Not Coltrane, but Ornette Coleman, and
Hmm.
uh, the list goes on and on. So we got so familiar with the club that we could just sort of walk in anytime and hang out with whoever was playing there. So I got to meet and hear a lot of great players.
Yeah. Did you guys spend more time rehearsing and recording or playing with the Grisman Quintet, or was it kind of a half and half?
Yeah, I guess you'd call it rehearsing. I mean, we got because the tunes that David was writing, they were kind of getting finished being written while we rehearsed. Like he might have his melody, but then I would learn the melody, and then he would work out a harmony, and the overall structure would develop while we were learning it. If it was a new one. So, and
Yeah.
some of his had been around a little while. Uh, there was a band called the Great American Music Band before the Grisman Quintet, and uh, with Richard Green and Joe Carroll and David Grisman, Ellen Carney, and um, John Carlini.
Oh, right. The
So
other,
so that's where
yeah.
me and Daryl. I guess Daryl. That's where I first heard the music.
Um,
It was kind of the beginning of that instrumental band, and it was much looser, because Tony didn't bring that kind of Lexington, Kentucky tightness to it yet. But
yeah.
um, there was two guitar players, and it was a little strummier and like just lankier feeling. But um, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice here again. uh, I forget the question. I'm off on a tangent.
Well, I don't know. The question I think was, were you rehearsing a lot or
Oh yeah,
performing a lot, and then um, you mentioned the
yeah,
the band before, the Grisman Quintet, which is a Great American Music Hall band, and
yeah.
that Joe Carroll and stuff
So
like
I
that.
snuck. I snuck initially. I had David gave me some of those tapes of the Great American Music Band, and I snuck some copies of those cassettes to Daryl Anger. So he had kind of learned the Richard Green parts that were in those.
Yeah.
So he showed up at David's, he was, already had a handle on some of it. And yeah, I think we just probably got together, roughly 5 days a week. We might have had a couple days off. And we weren't, I mean, it was rehearsing, but it was also just like we were saying, it's just lifestyle. We didn't think of it that way. And we didn't even know what the goal was necessarily. Like
Mm.
Tony was used to playing 5 nights or 7 nights a week in Lexington. And, he thought we'd be playing a gig like 3 days after he got there, but we rehearsed for months and months and months until we
Hmm.
finally set up 3 or 4 initial gigs that were just small little venues with no sound system whatsoever, 100% acoustic,
Wow.
like you do at the bookstore there. And,
Hmm.
um, maybe we went out to this little town called Bolinas, out on the coast, where Alfred Hitchcock shot the birds.
Oh, right.
Town
Yes.
called Bolinas
Yes.
out there. So we played a
Yeah.
little like town hall there, probably for, I guess, like 150 people maybe. But there's a lot of really creative people that live out there, and so it was kind of an exciting debut, um, and then we did two or three more of those, and then a few months after that, we got booked to do a tour of Japan, and for 10
Oh,
days, I believe, and I had to do double duty. We did a opening bluegrass band with Richard Green and Bill Keith, and then we did the quintet after that.
wow.
So, they wanted the bluegrass band, and we kind of, I'm sure David talked to him and said, "Well, I've got a new kind of music started, and we'll do both."
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the story I hear is that there was some disagreement about a tour with Stefan Grappelli, and Tony left
Yeah,
David's band, and then did he immediately start his band and um, invite you
yeah.
into it?
We just sort of spun off at the same time. I mean, I think he felt, and I guess maybe I felt too. We joined David's band to do David's music, and he was taking a left turn with Stefan, which, I mean, of course, that's understandable. And we just did a movie soundtrack with Stefan. So, sort of one thing sort of led to another.
Yeah.
So we got to record with Stefan. We spent days and days in the studio with him, and even with a full orchestra and, all the movie soundtrack kind of stuff, which was an amazing experience. But then, I think, well, how long have we been together? Maybe 4 to 5 years at that point.
Hmm.
And it's a pretty good stretch. And then Tony was writing more and more of his own songs, and we may have already been kind of casually playing on the side with John Reichman, and I can't remember all the circumstances. I know that Daryl and Mike Marshall and me and Tony had played quite a few quartet gigs too. We were doing a thing on the side, just kind of a looser version of the quintet, where
Wow.
we kind of making up our own rules instead of
Yeah.
following the usual
Right.
rules. And
Hmm.
so I guess just those little split offs started to happen, and then yeah, immediately I was working with Tony on his Tony Rice unit.
Right. I was talking to Phil Rosenthal, who lives near me in Connecticut, and was a singer guitarist for the Seldom Scene for about
Yeah,
9 years,
yeah.
and he told me, which I didn't realize, that they one day called him into the office and said, "You're fired." Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't know
I'd never
that.
do that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
he said to me, he was pretty upset because it was a good gig, and they were a big band, and he said the only person who really called him to commiserate with his being fired was Tony at the
Oh
time.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, he said Tony called him and said, "Yeah, I kind of had a similar thing with David Grisman Band, and I don't know if he was fired, but he just felt like it was kind of a bad breaking up." And he said, "I feel for you." So I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting.
Well,
I,
it
I,
was
I
I wouldn't say it was a firing. That sounds rough, man. I can't even
yeah,
imagine who did that. John Duffy?
I think they were looking for a different, more traditional bluegrass direction, and I guess they had already
Yeah.
made the decision without consulting Phil, and they just
Yeah.
brought him in and had a business meeting and said, basically, you can continue
Yeah.
the next three gigs or not, but we're replacing you.
Yeah. Well, that's kind
Uh,
of what we went through with the bass players until Tony sort of manipulated me into the bass player slot because, I mean, I guess he liked my bass playing, but and we were doing that on the side, and that's more of what he was looking for. He thought the in fact, he knew of Mike Marshall, and he sort of invited him in over to California for a visit, and that chemistry just worked better. Anyway, you got to adjust the chemistry of bands sometimes
right,
until you get what you want.
right. So
And it
you,
really it really
yeah,
is the people. It really is the person. People just play their personalities. So
mm-hmm,
um, yeah, it's getting that chemistry to match and or whatever, react, catalyze each other,
yeah.
however you want to look at it.
So when you guys worked on the Manzanita album, do you remember helping choose songs? Was the band helping kind of come up with ideas for let's do this, let's try this? How did
Not
that?
really. Not
No?
really. I think it was more just like a another recording session. Like it's Tony's record. Hey, here's what we're gonna do. You know, we're doing this next. We're doing that next. I don't. I don't really remember preparing at all for it. Um, it just sort of happened in the studio because those guys flew in, and the day they were there, that's the day we started working on it, and
Right.
it was probably cut in about 4 days, I'm guessing.
Hmm.
You know, 3, 4 songs a day, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Did that particular Tony Rice unit perform a lot live, or was it
The
like would you?
Manzanita
Yeah, that band was that.
group,
Would you play a lot, or would you?
not really. I
No.
think we took one night off while we were making the record, and we ran over to the Great American Music Hall and played a live show. In fact, I know we did. I know we did, and it's probably you can find it on YouTube now. Um, a pretty halfway decent tape off the board there. I don't know where they're coming from, but they're
Right.
they're showing up more and more. So yeah, we did that. So yeah, in the middle of recording the record, or maybe at the after on the last night or something like that, we turned it into a gig. And I think we did a couple of little tours, but not a lot, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Were you doing other projects at the same time as that of your own, or with other bands, or?
Well, that would have been while we were still in the Grisman Quintet, that would have
Yes.
been 78 maybe.
Uh-huh.
So in a way, that's kind of in the peak, right in the middle of the Grisman Quintet. Um, Probably Mike Marshall had already moved to California or was just moving to California. So maybe in that little gap where we were switching me over to bass and Mike moving out, and I think that's probably about the time we did the Manzanita thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so then moving on a little bit, I know that the Bluegrass Album Band, I guess, was Tony's idea just to do kind of a classic bluegrass
Yeah.
album, and then it stretched into what, 6 different albums?
6 of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
did you guys all were you all involved in choosing material for those, or was that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think probably between Doyle and Tony, the most of the material got arrived at,
Yeah.
because Doyle's got a massive repertoire, and Tony knew what he wanted to sing, and I remember Doyle suggesting songs. A lot of it happened in the studio. They might have had a few phone calls ahead of time, but the first one was kind of quick, and just getting shot out of a cannon kind of a thing. We just got together and played for a few days, and
Yeah.
the material is probably a little more right down the middle than the later ones. We started going a little more outside for
Uh-huh.
some of the tunes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that I think Tony just handpicked a bluegrass band, and uh, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, the second we got, I knew Crow a little bit. I maybe had never met Doyle or Hicks
Yeah.
before,
Hmm.
so and I knew Jerry Douglas real well, but I think he came in on the second or third one, right? Um,
Yeah.
can't remember.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, maybe the third. Maybe we did two without the dobro, but yeah, the chemistry, like we were talking about, that chemistry just immediately had its own sound, um, like bluegrass, only better.
yeah, I mean, it was a pretty amazing bunch of music. It's held its own with everything ever made since, and I think it still inspires thousands of musicians.
Yeah,
It's
a
pretty
friend of
pretty.
mine, Craig Smith, the banjo player from North Carolina, he pointed this out to me, and it makes sense that there was a gap there where a lot of LPs were going out of print, and then there was a blank spot for a while, and then everything started coming in CD. So I
Yep.
guess the first three Bluegrass Album Band projects first came out on LP, but by the end we were coming out on CD and whatever. We kind of filled a gap, I think,
Uh-huh.
um, in format from LP to CD, and also just some of the old guys dying away, and or their LPs going out of print and that kind of thing. And so I don't think it was intentional, but it sort of became a uh, I don't know what the word is, uh, keeping it alive kind of a thing, putting
Yeah,
the
right.
putting the repertoire down for posterity, and when sometimes it was hard to find otherwise.
Yeah. I sometimes think that these bluegrass podcasts are kind of doing the same thing in a way for keeping everybody's memories alive for whoever. I don't know how
Yeah.
they'll get preserved, but I mean, I've only been doing this for 2 weeks, but I mean, I've
Wow.
talked to amazing people, and it's just incredible. I talked to Doyle Lawson, one of the first ones I did, and
Yeah.
he was talking about how much he was involved throughout his career in choosing songs for every band he played with, from Jimmy Martin to Country
Yeah.
Gentlemen. He was very much interested in, involved, and always looking for songs. That he
Yeah.
took it, that was his personal like challenge to find good material,
Yeah.
which
Well,
I
absolutely. And yeah, I witnessed that with the Bluegrass Album Band. I really think Tony was using him as a sounding board. Uh,
mm,
if he was short on ideas, or well, he knew Doyle would come up with a lot of ideas.
yeah,
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 more than we could ever record for sure.
yeah. Um, I was going to ask you just a little question about Tony Rice. He's always been my bluegrass hero. And to me, he had an emotional side to him that came out in his singing and his playing, and there was
Yeah.
always a certain mystique about him that I don't know what it was, but I feel like people who played with him in bands always played the best they ever played with him.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why that is, what he had that people just wanted to please him or play. I don't know. I can
Well,
never.
yeah. Well, yeah, because you can only play as good as the people you're playing with.
Right.
You know, uh, I can play out of time with the worst of them, but if I'm playing with JD Crowe or Tony Rice, I'm playing in time. Uh,
Yeah.
because it's there. If everybody can rise to that occasion, um, even like Crowe told me, he asked Earl Scruggs, "What do you do when you're playing with a band and they're dragging or they're rushing or whatever?" And Earl told him, "Oh, I just go with it, because
Hmm.
what else can you do? You can't fight it.
Right.
You can't get to the end of the song before or after the rest of the band.
Right. Right.
You have to. I mean, a good musician will play with what they're hearing, and so and be really heavily influenced by it. So Tony was a taskmaster, man, just like JD was. Um, and so, yeah, you had to rise to that expectation that they had, or hey, man, you won't be invited back,
Yeah. Right.
basically. So you can sink or swim with those guys, and yeah, I mean, it's. I was going to say it's stressful, but it isn't. It's easier in a way. Um, it's so hard to explain, man.
Hmm.
Talking about music,
Yeah.
uh,
Right.
but yeah, either your chemistry, you hit it off, and you have the right chemistry, and you hear things the same way or close enough that you're going to work together and make something nice, or it's a struggle and it doesn't all fit quite right, and
Mm.
but yeah, but you're right. I mean, and if I hear an old recording, like I've heard Backwaters, kind of recently,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking, man, I can't do that anymore. I was playing my best with Tony, like you said, and also I was like 30 years old and it just pumped up. Everything was fresh and new, and
Right.
I was working at it every day too. I don't do that anymore, uh, I kind of play when I have to now. It's a
Hmm.
terrible thing to say, but I mean, life goes on, and man, you got a house and broken down cars and kids and all these things you didn't have when you were 20 something. And uh, so, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have quite the freedom I had back then to dedicate 100% of my time, but yeah. And I was talking to David Grisman not long ago, and I'm 70 now. He's 77 or 78. And
Mhm.
he said, "Hey, man, I've sort of painted myself into a corner. Um, like I wrote all these fast tunes, like when he was younger. One of the first times I heard him, he kicked off, oh, what was it? Something on the Mule Skinner record. Oh, I can't think of what it was, but it's a mandolin kickoff,
Yep.
like super fast. And anyway, that was him when he was 20 something years old. But anyway, today he says, I've painted myself into a corner. I wrote all these fast tunes and I can't play that fast anymore. Um,
Yeah. Right. Well,
he's known for it, but it's kind of like a singer can lower the key a couple of notches, but a mandolin player, well, I told him, yeah, I guess you just play them slower.
right. Well, that
Uh,
leads me into an interesting question because I've heard a lot of players and experienced it even locally playing that sometimes playing fast fiddle tunes, for example, slowly you get a whole different take and melodic sense and kind of invention out of it that you don't play when you play breakneck speed. I was wondering how that
yeah.
affects you as a bass player. I'm sure you've probably had to adjust your playing, as you say, over time. Your fingers aren't what they were. The energy isn't what it was. How have you changed your approach to the
Well,
bass over time? Can
I
you?
I've probably boiled down what I do to more essentials. Like some of the stuff I hear on the Bluegrass Album Band records, I would never do today. I was young. I was trying to show, hey, look, I can do this. And I really don't like the message in music to be, hey, look what I can do. It just wears me out. But when
Yeah.
you're younger, you're reaching for those things. So it's an odd balance. Like it's amazing to hear younger players reach for things and it's exciting. It's like acrobatics, high wire act. But the element of taste isn't always where it should be necessarily. And, um,
Right.
and simpler music sometimes is more difficult to do, like with a maturity, because there's no place to hide. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're not
Right.
trying to prove anything, but you're working with the music, the piece of music, and you just want to play in tune and in time. And so anyway, I probably play less now, and but better in another way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Not fancier for sure. But I don't think I have any trouble playing fast. But when I do get together with younger players, which is now at my age, like almost every single time, um, I try to push the idea of digging a deeper groove to play in, not
Mm-hmm.
like there's that runaway snowball groove in bluegrass, which to me
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't have the feeling of a really good pocket, a really good groove. It's just fast. Um, and a friend of mine, a great bass player named Willie Weeks, he has this thing he says, don't mistake a rut for a groove. you know, so
That's a good one.
it is, yeah. So today, I mean that runaway super high speed bluegrass, that's not a rut, but it's just kind of a, I don't know. It's frantic, and I don't know. I don't. You can't dance to it. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't hardly
Yeah.
pat your foot. So I just like to dig a deeper groove these days. It just has a bit more feel. I'm looking for the feel, um, not the speed so much.
Mm-hmm. I remember first listening to Trey Hensley and Rob Ikes, not to pick on any two people, but they're both
Yeah,
amazing musicians. I'm sure you know them both well.
yeah.
And when they started playing together, Trey was a really, really fast guitar player. I mean, he still is, but
He can
I,
play fast.
I,
Yeah,
I, I remember thinking to myself, "Wow, Rob, how do you even keep up with him?" But I think he's one of those people that I think over time and playing with Rob has developed a little more of a sense of where where the pocket is and where the notes could be left out maybe.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see. He's not the only one. I mean, there's a lot of great, I I know guitar players because I like guitar, but a lot of great pickers who can play incredibly fast. But as you say, um, once you play that speed, then where do you go from there? It's
Right.
you can't really
Yeah,
keep it
yeah.
up.
You have to have something to say too. You have to have,
Yeah.
well, it really is the soul of the player, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Trey, man, his skills are amazing. And, I've been doing some recording sessions with him. In fact, tomorrow morning, a Steve Martin track comes out. Me, Trey, Stuart Duncan, and Sam Bush, and Steve Martin and Allison Brown. Um,
Nice.
it's a song. It's a song. Check it out
Yeah. Yeah.
tomorrow on Compass. I think they're going to release it at 10 in the morning here in Nashville time. And it's Steve. It's a Steve Martin song, so it's pretty funny.
Mm.
And the band's pretty good too.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Wow.
but yeah, Trey is on those, and yeah, I've seen him. Like you said, I've seen him develop beyond. I mean, it's weird. Like I don't have that ability. Some people, like I had to really struggle with ability to play fast. Some of these guys, man, like I can't believe it. He can repeat his solo. Like when we do a video or something, he
Yeah.
will finger sync his solo exactly. And then I look over at Stuart Duncan and myself, and we can't even get our hand in the right area of the fingerboard. you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess part of it's just youth and you know, fingers that will do anything
Yeah. Muscle
eventually.
memory matching
Yeah.
his brain memory. Yeah, which I don't know. Yeah. I'm more out on
You,
a limb every time, I think.
yeah, I hear you. So you've done a lot of stuff. You've done a lot of teaching, producing, playing, recording. Is there anything in music that you always wanted to do, or anyone you always wanted to play with that you haven't had a chance to do
Hmm.
yet?
Wow. Good
Any like
question.
wish list kind of thing? I asked Missy Raines this question. She said, if you could have played with anybody in the history of music, who would you have wanted to play with? She said Jimmy Martin
Ah.
as a duo. So that was interesting.
That's a
Yeah.
good answer. That's a good answer. I feel like I've played with Jimmy Martin just like secondhand from Crow and Tony, Uh, but yeah, I didn't. I never had the direct. I'm one generation removed. But
Yeah.
I think that is something. That oh, it definitely rubbed off on JD Crow. There's something there. That firsthand experience. I mean, I don't really have an answer for you. I think I've been really freaking lucky and played with
Yeah.
a lot of my heroes.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you enjoy doing for example like a bass vocal duet thing or like
yeah.
bass guitar? Yeah. Is there anyone like in that realm that you'd like to, duet with? I mean,
Ooh,
you've
you
played
mean
with lots of people, but
just
anyone,
vocally, you mean?
yeah, like a
Um,
singer that you
yeah.
like to play bass with, or maybe singer, guitarist, or singer, fiddler, or something, but
Yeah.
just a
Well,
duo.
Lori Lewis did a couple of just me and her bass and vocal things. I've done that with her. I have recorded with like Joan Osborne, like a voice like that.
Hmm.
It wasn't a duet,
Yeah.
Gabe Butcher's on it, Mike
Yeah.
Marshall's on it, but oh man, that would be like a meaty tone, Joan Osborne, and if I got to play bass, that would be
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
Um, who else? So I don't know. But yeah, no, I like the freedom of that. In a way, I like the smaller the band, the better. Like I love duets and trios because it's a different role. In a trio, like when we did the David Greer, Matt Flinner, and myself, um,
Right.
I kind of had a third of the pie, and we weren't, delegated to that traditional role. And David Greer's, I think he's better in a trio than a five-piece band because he can't mind the rules for very long.
I hear you. Yeah.
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 So, that's kind of fun to have that freedom. And with a singer, if it's just a duet, I can really control the ebb and flow of the tempo and the feel and the intensity, and it's really just a true conversation kind of a thing, as opposed to just being a gear in a machine. uh,
Uh, I remember I'm a big jazz fan. I remember listening to the Dwight Mitchell, Willie Ruff duet stuff where Willie Ruff was playing French horn and Dwight Mitchell was playing piano. So they
wow,
did some
I don't
albums
know that
together.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool. I
Mm.
like to duet myself. I mean, to me, it's almost the ultimate musical thing. I mean, solo is
Yeah.
one thing, but two people, you have so much more going on, but you don't have the whole band to kind of hide behind. And I love the
Yeah.
duet.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can stretch, you can pause, you can breathe, yeah, it's just a true conversation,
Yeah.
and it'll find its own rhythm. And I mean, you'll probably be keeping a constant tempo, but uh, by rhythm, I just mean like intensity or something. Hey, speaking of that, I'm playing with the guitarist Zeb Snyder in this Appalachian Roadshow band,
Yep.
and he's about to start a recording project. And we talk about it a lot together, and we're going to do a bunch of duets. There's going to be just bass and guitar quite a bit, and he's keeping it small like that, maybe just a little fiddle here and there, or a second guitar, or I'm not sure yet. We're going to do it at
Right.
the end of this month.
Wow. Well,
But yeah,
if you're ever looking for a little gig in New England,
yeah, man.
we can always put you up.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. When it comes out, maybe just him and I can scoot up there. Jason Carter's probably going to be on a bit of it, and Sam Bush. So we're going to kind of keep it mostly those four guys, and but I think there's going to be quite a bit of just maybe a couple solo guitars and a couple duets with me, and then add in
Mhm.
a little Jason, a little Sam Bush, and call it a record.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I remember when you were here, we were talking a little bit about home renovation.
Oh yeah,
You have a bungalow, is that right? Like
I
a
do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
I,
remember we were talking about wiring and things back. This was a few years ago. So
Hey,
what's going on
I'm
now?
still, I haven't progressed a heck of a lot. When I have the time, I don't have the money. And when I have the money, when I'm making money, means I'm not even home. So,
Yeah.
no, it's a 1933 little craftsman bungalow. And, instead of doing like one big renovation over 6 months, I have dragged out teeny tiny improvements one at a time over the last 15 years.
Yeah, I
And
get it. Believe
I
me.
don't see the progress. It's just keeping it from falling down kind of a thing,
Yeah.
But I
Well,
do it. Yeah, I'm still doing it.
it's fun, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah,
slow. I mean, as you say,
yeah,
it takes forever to get anything done if you don't have a lot of time or money to put into it all at once. It's
yeah.
just
And
pick
a
away at it.
crew.
But
And a
in a
crew. I
crew,
mean,
yeah.
bass players can't hire crews, man. I'm my own crew, and so it's real slow. But the back
Uh,
porch has fallen off, and I'm gonna knock it off the rest of the way and rebuild that. That's
oh,
my next thing.
sounds like a good project. I
Yeah,
wouldn't go.
yeah.
I did a lot of porch work in my years of restoration. I always loved building porches and restoring them.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just a fun thing, and it looks
Well,
so great when you're done.
hey man, I'll send you a picture. This is the
Okay.
old-fashioned back porch that probably used to be screen, and
Yeah.
like the meter boxes in there and the fuse box and everything, and uh, the floor is slanted like it used to get rained into, and has a
Hmm.
stone foundation. And so yeah, I'll give you a little updates, man. It's going to be similar to the chicken coop I built from scratch, which was uh, kind of like a little palace, a chicken palace, an attachment to the garage. That's my other kind of more major thing.
You have chickens in there now.
Just one left. We're kind of getting
Oh.
tired of it. We're getting
Uh,
tired of it, man. We've
yeah.
gone through about 3 batches of them,
Hmm.
and we're letting the foxes and the hawks kind of do their thing now.
Letting nature take its course.
That's right. Yeah, but this one, man, she just won't get caught. She's hanging in there, and she's got to be 4 years old and still laying eggs. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
That's impressive.
we're leaving her. Yeah, she's living in luxury, man. She's got a nice house.
So any special advice you'd want to share with our millions of podcast listeners?
Yeah.
Any
Yeah,
before we
yeah,
wrap it up, I
yeah,
don't know if you have anything special you want to say or
yeah,
uh
yeah. Don't think of being a musician. It's really hard.
okay.
No,
I
I
don't
mean, it's kind of like we were talking about the Grisman Band. You'll become a musician if if it's so in front of your face in your life that you just don't think about it. You don't give it any thought because it's really, kind of unreasonable and unrealistic in a lot of ways. But if you just don't have any choice and that's what you're going to pursue, that's the way you're going to go. And that's kind of what it takes. I mean, and then there's all kinds of levels in between because, you know, there's a guitar in every other house on the block. That people can enjoy playing. But, you know, uh, as a lifestyle, yeah, be prepared to make a lot of sacrifices and uh,
yeah,
stick with it if that's what if that's what you need to do.
yeah, yeah, right.
And it's like we were talking about, like just the connections. Like for me, I mean, I was real serious about it. It's all I did from the age of 11 to 22, and then meeting Grisman. I mean, maybe it could have ended there, or I kept making new connections and meeting new people and learning new music. So I really didn't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm. Well, it turned out pretty well for you, I have to say. I
It's
mean, really, when
it's
you look
been
back.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, well, I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna thank you so much for chatting with me today. I've really had a great time talking about this era of American music that you were such a big part of, and I wish you the best in all your endeavors, and hopefully see you again on the East Coast sometime.
yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. I'll bug you for a gig later when we have our duet happening or something.
You don't have to bug me; just send me an email. You're
Okay.
you're all set.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
thanks
Thanks.
for chatting. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. See you
Okay,
later. Bye bye.
bye. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.